Music used to live in boxes. This was especially true in the 1950s. The walls between these boxes were tall and thick. You had your box for pop music, you had another for country and western, and you had a third for rhythm and blues. They were separate worlds. The radio stations that played them were separate. The record stores often kept them in separate sections. The charts that tracked their popularity were entirely separate. It was a system of musical segregation, and it reflected the broader segregation of the country. The pop charts were for mainstream America. This was the music of your parents if you were a teenager in 1956. It was polished, professional, and safe. Think of singers like Perry Como or Patti Page. The orchestras were big, the emotions were controlled, the production was clean. This was music designed to be pleasant, to be played in the living room without offending anyone. It was overwhelmingly white, both in its performers and its intended audience. It was the sound of conformity of a post-war America that valued stability. Then you had the country and western charts. This was the music of rural America, of the South, and the Midwest. It came from places like Nashville and Bakersfield. It was the music of the Grand Ole Opry. The stories in the songs were about real life, about heartbreak, work, and faith. The sound was distinct. You heard fiddles, steel guitars, and voices with a certain twang. Artists like Hank Williams had laid the groundwork with raw, honest songs. By the mid-50s, stars like Kitty Wells and Webb Pierce were singing about lost love and honky-tonk life. This music had its own audience, its own culture, and its own rules. It was considered raw and unsophisticated by the pop establishment. And then there was the rhythm and blues chart. This was the music coming out of black communities. It was vibrant, exciting, and deeply influential. It was the music of Fats Domino, of Little Richard, of Chuck Berry. It had a strong backbeat, a powerful rhythm that made you want to move. The vocals were expressive, full of emotion and energy. The lyrics could be playful, suggestive, or full of bluesy sorrow. This was the music that was starting to scare people. It was loud, it was energetic, and for many white parents, it was dangerous. It was the sound of a cultural shift getting ready to happen. To the mainstream, R&B was a world away, and artists lived in one of these boxes. You were a pop singer, a country star, or an R&B musician. You didn't cross over. Sure, sometimes a pop singer might cover an R&B song, but it was always a sanitized, cleaned-up version. The original R&B hit would stay on its own chart, while the pop cover would hit the pop chart. The system was designed to keep things separate. The idea of one artist with one song being a massive hit in all three of these worlds at the same time seemed impossible. It would be like a movie being the biggest hit at the art house cinema, the suburban multiplex, and a drive-in theater all at once. The audiences were just too different. The cultural gatekeepers were too powerful. To break through all three walls, you would need a very special kind of artist. He would need to be from one world, but sound like he belonged in all of them. He would need to have the polish of a pop star, the soul of an R&B singer, and the heart of a country boy. He would need to be a musical chameleon, yet completely authentic, and he would need a song that could do the same thing. A song that was simple enough for pop radio, soulful enough for R&B fans, and familiar enough for the country audience. In 1956, that artist and that song appeared, and nothing was ever the same again. The artist, of course, was Elvis Presley, but you can't understand his impact in 1956 without understanding where he came from. He didn't just appear out of nowhere. He was a product of a very specific time and place. He grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and later Memphis, Tennessee. He grew up poor, and he grew up surrounded by all kinds of music. He listened to the country stars on the Grand Ole Opry radio broadcasts. He sang gospel music in church, and in Memphis, he absorbed the blues and R&B from Beale Street. He wasn't a tourist in these musical worlds, he was a resident. They were all part of his DNA. When he started his career at Sun Records with Sam Phillips, the goal wasn't to create a new genre. It was just to make something that felt real. His early recordings were experiments. He'd take a blues song like Arthur Big Boy, crude ups That's Alright, and sing it with a country feel. He'd take a bluegrass song like Bill Monroe's Blue Moon of Kentucky and give it a rhythm and blues beat. He was mixing the boxes together before he even knew what he was doing. It was natural. Sam Phillips knew he had something special. He had found, as the legend goes, a white kid who could sing with the feel of a black artist. This early music, later called rockabilly, was raw and exciting. It made him a regional star. But it was still mostly seen as a country phenomenon. His early hits were on the country charts. The move to a major label, RCA, in late 1955 changed everything. RCA had more money, more promotion, and a vision to make him the biggest star in the world. His first release for them Heartbreak Hotel was a smash. It was a dark, moody, blues-inflected song that went to #1 on the pop charts. It also went to #1 on the country charts. This was already a huge achievement, but it only made it to #3 on the R&B charts. It was a massive crossover hit, but it hadn't quite conquered every world. It was a little too strange, a little too stark for some. It proved he could break down 2 walls, but that third one, the wall between all 3, was still standing. The world was now watching him. He was a sensation. His appearances on television were causing a national uproar. His dance moves, the way he sneered, the raw energy he projected, it was all too much for the establishment. He was a symbol of teenage rebellion. Parents were scared. Critics were dismissive. But the kids couldn't get enough. He was selling millions of records. He was a cultural force. But the question remained, could he unite everyone? Could he release a song that wasn't just a hit, but a universal hit? A song that the pop kids, the country folks, and the R&B fans would all buy and all love at the very same time. That brings us to the summer of 1956. He needed his next single. The pressure was immense. He had to follow up Heartbreak Hotel and I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. He needed something big. The song that would achieve this monumental feat didn't come from a Nashville songwriter or a Tin Pan Alley pop composer. It came from an African-American songwriter from Brooklyn named Otis Blackwell. Otis Blackwell was a brilliant songwriter. He knew how to write a catchy, clever R&B tune. He had a knack for simple, effective lyrics and memorable melodies. He wrote songs for artists like Little Willie John and later Jerry Lee Lewis. The story goes that he sold the demo for this particular song, along with a few others, for a very small amount of money. He never even met Elvis, but he wrote a song that was perfectly suited for him. The song wasn't a hard-driving rocker. It wasn't a tear-in-your-beer country ballad. It was something else. It was cool, it was smooth. It had a unique, shuffling rhythm that was impossible to resist. The recording session took place on July 2nd, 1956, in New York City. The band was his core group, Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black on bass, and DJ Fontana on drums. The Jordanaires were there to provide backing vocals. They worked on the song all day. So it took them nearly 30 takes to get it right. Elvis was a professional. He knew what he wanted it to sound like. He wanted it to be relaxed, almost casual. He didn't want to shout it. He wanted to croon it, but with a bluesy feel. Let's break down the song itself. What made it so special? First, the rhythm. DJ Fontana isn't playing a frantic rock and roll beat. He's mostly just tapping the back of the guitar case and a bell, creating a simple, steady boom, boom sound. It's a mid-tempo shuffle. It's a groove you can nod your head to. It's not aggressive, it's inviting. Bill Black's bass walks along, providing a solid melodic foundation. Scotty Moore's guitar is clean and understated, playing little fills that punctuate the vocals. And then there are the vocals. This is where the magic really happens. Elvis's performance is a masterclass in cool. He's not straining, he's not pushing, he's completely in control. He sings with a playful confidence. You can hear his signature vocal tics, the little stutters and slurs that made him sound so unique. The lyrics are simple and direct. It's a plea to a lover. The singer is asking for kindness, for affection. You know I can be found, sitting home all alone. If you can't come around, at least please telephone. It's a vulnerable sentiment, but he sings it with such charm that it doesn't sound weak. It sounds charismatic. The finishing touch was the backing vocals from the Jordanaires. Their smooth bop-bop-bop-bop harmonies added a layer of pop polish. They sounded like a classic doo-wop group. This was a key ingredient. Their vocals smoothed out the rough edges. They made the song palatable for mainstream pop radio, which was used to vocal groups and polished production. So you had a song with a steady R&B groove, a lead vocal full of bluesy phrasing and country warmth, and pop-friendly backing vocals. It was a perfect synthesis. It was a musical melting pot boiled down into 2 minutes of perfection. It didn't belong to any one genre. It belonged to all of them, but the story doesn't end there. To understand the song's massive success, you have to look at the other side of the record. In those days, singles were released on 45 RPM vinyl records. You had the A-side, which was the song the record company was pushing as the hit, and you had the B-side, which was usually a lesser track. But for this release, the B-side was a monster in its own right. The B-side was Hound Dog. Hound Dog was the complete opposite of the A-side. It was loud, fast, and aggressive. It was a raw, snarling piece of rock and roll. It was a cover of a song originally recorded by the great blues singer Big Mama Thornton. Her version was a slow, powerful blues number. Elvis transformed it. He had been performing a version he heard from a Las Vegas lounge act, but he made it his own. His version was a musical explosion. It was driven by DJ Fontana's thunderous drumming and Scotty Moore's frantic guitar solo. It was the sound of rebellion that parents feared. This B-side was at the center of a huge controversy. Just before the record was released, Elvis performed Hound Dog on the Milton Berle show. He sang it with a slow, grinding tempo and ended the performance with his now infamous hip swivels. The press and the cultural critics went ballistic. They called him vulgar, obscene. They said he was a danger to the youth of America. The controversy became a national news story. A few weeks later, he appeared on the Steve Allen Show. To tone him down, the producers made him sing Hound Dog to an actual basset hound while wearing a tuxedo. It was meant to be humiliating, to make him a joke. But all this controversy had an unintended effect. It made him the most talked about person in America. Everyone wanted to see what the fuss was about. And everyone wanted to buy the record with that scandalous song on it. So people rushed to the record stores to buy Hound Dog. But when they bought the record, they got two songs. They flipped it over and heard this other track. This cool, smooth, incredibly catchy song on the A-side. This created a unique situation. The record became what is known as a double-sided hit. Radio stations were playing both songs. The pop charts actually listed them together at number 1. Hound Dog was the raw, exciting rocker that drew in the rebellious teens. The A-side was the song that appealed to almost everyone else. It was so well crafted, so charming, that you couldn't help but like it. The two songs worked together like a 1-2 punch. One was the sizzle, the other was the steak. One was the controversy, the other was the consensus. Now let's look at how this perfect storm conquered the three charts. The pop chart was the easy one. By the summer of 1956, Elvis was the biggest pop star in the country. Any record he released was destined to be a hit. The A-side was incredibly radio-friendly. It had a catchy melody, a smooth production, and a theme of young love. It was a perfect pop song, even if it had more of a groove than a typical Perry Como track. It combined with the massive publicity from the Hound Dog controversy, it was a guaranteed number 1 on the Billboard Top 100. It stayed there for an incredible 11 weeks, a record at the time. The country chart was also a natural fit. Elvis was still seen by many as one of their own, a country boy from Mississippi who had made it big. His voice, even on a pop-leaning song, still had a hint of a country accent. The storytelling in the lyrics, that simple, direct plea, felt at home in country music. The song's structure wasn't that different from some of the Western swing and shuffle tunes that were popular. He had already topped the country charts with Heartbreak Hotel and I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. His country audience was loyal. They followed him here too and sent the song straight to number 1 on the C&W Bestsellers chart. The real challenge, the final wall to break, was the R&B chart. Why did this song by a white artist become a number 1 hit with black audiences? This is the most significant part of the story. There are several reasons. First, the song's DNA was pure R&B. It was written by Otis Blackwell, an accomplished R&B songwriter. It had a genuine R&B feel in its rhythm and vocal phrasing. It wasn't a white artist trying to imitate R&B, it was a white artist who had so deeply absorbed R&B that it came out of him naturally. Second, black audiences and radio stations had been paying attention to Elvis for a while. There were rumors early in his career that he was black. His voice was just that soulful. R&B artists like B.B. King knew and respected his early work at Sun. The musical segregation on the charts didn't always reflect the reality on the ground. People listened to what they like, regardless of the label. This song was simply a great R&B record, and it was recognized as such. Finally, the whole package was just undeniable. The groove was infectious, his vocal performance was charismatic. It was a song that felt good to listen to. It had soul. In a world of sanitized pop covers, this felt authentic. It wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was, and so the song climbed to the top of the R&B bestsellers chart, where it also stayed for weeks. This was it! The impossible had happened. One song, one artist, was number 1 on the pop, country, and R&B charts all at the same time. The boxes had been broken, the walls had come down. It was an unprecedented cultural event. It showed that music could be a unifying force. It proved that the divisions the industry had created were artificial. The young people, whether they were in a city apartment, a suburban home, or a rural farmhouse, were all listening to the same beat. What made this song the first to achieve this feat was a perfect convergence of factors. It was the right artist, an artist who was a living blend of all three genres. It was the right time and moment when the post-war cultural consensus was starting to crack and teenagers were looking for a sound of their own. It was the right song, a masterpiece of songwriting and performance that was simple, soulful, and sophisticated all at once. And it had the perfect partner, a controversial B-side that generated a tidal wave of publicity and drove everyone to the record store. This achievement wasn't just a sales statistic, it was a cultural landmark. It marked the moment that rock and roll, this new hybrid music, truly became the dominant force in American culture. It opened the door for countless other artists, both black and white, to cross over and reach wider audiences. It changed the way the music industry thought about genre and marketing. The song itself is almost a mission statement. It's a plea for love and understanding, delivered with a cool confidence that suggests everything is going to be alright. In 1956, that was a powerful message. It was a song that didn't just top the charts, it redefined them. It brought different Americas together, if only for 2 minutes at a time, to tap their feet to the same irresistible rhythm. The song was, of course, Don't Be Cruel.